Hi folks, it's Florida Man here, bringing you an after-action report on a diplomacy game I played on the War in the Americas map, only available on PlayDiplomacy.com. The name of this particular game was Land of the Free. The game was organized by Big Gun, so it featured such well-known fixtures on Play Diplomacy as Gun himself, Josie Wales, Norlight, Strategus, and Woolgi, as well as some players I must admit I'm not as familiar with. The game was set to build anywhere, to maximize our collective freedom. As I've mentioned before, the War in the Americas map has the following playable powers: Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Great Britain, Mexico, New Granada, Peru, Spain, the United States, and Venezuela. In this particular game, I played as Great Britain. The challenge of that position on this map is that you start out with units in 3 different regions of the map, so you're outnumbered by your neighbors in each region, and your units can't initially support each other. The bright side is that you have reason to communicate and negotiate with almost every power on the map if you play Great Britain, which I like to think brings out my greatest strengths as a diplomacy player. I began this game by communicating widely, trying to make strategic partnerships with powers that were next to my neighbors so that I could launch pincer attacks with allies on multiple fronts. I started off having a good relationship with Venezuela, but surprisingly few of my other diplomatic efforts were successful. I found Brazil aggressive, and the United States was overtly hostile right off the bat. I was fortunate enough to be able to at least get along with Spain. With Spring 1841 orders, I'm immediately attacked by the United States, while Spain opens in a neutral way, and Mexico opens seeking to grab some Western North American centers. In South America, I move to grab neutral Georgetown or Suriname. Venezuela moves against Brazil, and New Granada moves against Venezuela. Further south, Argentina opens in a way that is hostile to me, and it feels as if there's probably a pretty good relationship between him and Brazil. Peru opens to the center of South America, which is a legitimate threat to Brazil, but does not prove he has hostile intentions. With the fall, Argentina proves he was actually opening in a way intended to prevent me from growing. Chile takes 2 uncontested neutrals, and Peru does indeed grab Santa Cruz, taking the very center of the continent. It seems like ground that will be difficult to hold if Brazil ever attacks him. On Brazil's end, he prevents Venezuela from getting one of the neutrals Venezuela had aimed for, allowing Brazil to take 2 builds in locations that shouldn't stretch his defensive capabilities, and he even has a unit he's not doing anything with that goes into mid-Atlantic Ocean. New Granada also jumps into the attack on Venezuela, so Venezuela is pretty much screwed. On my side, I was successful in acquiring a few neutrals, but I'm a bit worried. The United States really was committed to attacking me, as proved by his moves, and he can certainly stalemate me in the northern region for years, if not actually destroy my Canadian forces. Spain opened toward neutral centers, but he has no particular reason not to jump on me along with everyone else when the opportunity arises. Mexico looks too weak to be a good ally against the US for the moment. Argentina kept me from acquiring the neutral center of Patagonia, despite my best efforts at promising eternal friendship and treasure, and although I got Suriname, the friendly Venezuelan government looks about ready to collapse, with the next push from New Granada or Brazil. With the build phase, my forces almost double, but it's not enough for me to have a dominant position anywhere, and frankly, actually doubling isn't unheard of, with Great Britain on this map. Unfortunately, I felt it was necessary to throw one of the builds in the Falklands Islands, because otherwise I'm sure Argentina would invade. Supporting that inference, he does build a fleet. Elsewhere, only one of the United States' 2 builds seems to be focused on me. Brazil, Chile, and Peru are all mainly focused on each other. The major problem with the builds is New Granada, who acquired a fleet that could only be useful against me. That means my Mediterranean forces have almost no choice but to engage with him. In spring 1842, New Granada and Brazil continue to join forces against me and Venezuela, which isn't great since they have us outnumbered after those 1841 moves. The United States devotes almost everything he has to attacking me, while at the same time Mexico attempts to move against him. Spain moves in a way that makes me hopeful that we'll all pile on the United States together, an idea I'm actively pushing, since the US decided to make me an enemy for no apparent reason from the first season. Argentina is also attacking me, which makes me wonder if maybe the problem is just my personality. I know it can't be bad breath, since we're playing online. Chile continues to move so as to acquire neutral centers, while his other moves suggest that he could attack either Argentina or Peru, his naturally early opponent options. Peru divides his forces to attack New Granada while also moving south against Argentina or possibly Brazil. In fall 1842, Peru will continue this behavior by moving one unit into Tucumán, next to an Argentine home center, as well as moving defensively against Brazil. Meanwhile, Brazil focuses north, stealing Trinidad from me. I continue to make scant progress all around, mainly because I am the least popular power on the map right now. Argentina positions to attack Chile, while still messing around with me. The United States attacks me unsuccessfully while also fending off Mexico. New Granada mostly ignores me this season, but I know it's only because he knows I'm out of position to do anything to him. It's a frustrating year. In the build phase, I destroy my isolated fleet in Suriname, which is basically surrounded by Brazilian units anyway. Mexico builds an army that can only be used against the United States. Spain continues building up his armada. All of the South American powers who have builds get armies because they want to invade each other. At least that hopefully means they're less worried about me. In spring 1843, Chile manages to persuade Argentina to move back from their shared borders, and Chile moves into that vacated space. This drastic change in the tempo of their fight will have big consequences for both countries. Brazil does very little other than occupy Suriname. New Granada continues pushing Venezuela back, while I finally come close to being able to attack New Granada. The United States finally tries to withdraw from the border with my Canadian forces, but he misorders, so the withdrawal fails. At the same time, I tried to fill up that gap, just like what Chile was doing to Argentina, and I also failed. Mexico continues gobbling up the west coast, while Spain NMRs. Peru continues to move most of his units south to attack Argentina, which is a big mistake for a few reasons, as anyone who can read a diplomacy map could tell you. Reason 1 is Argentina isn't normally one of his neighbors, which will make it harder for him to attack and defend any territory he acquires in that region. Reason 2 is that attacking such a faraway country necessarily leaves his homeland less defended than it should be, which is a particular problem when you have a hungry wolf like the Brazilian player for a next-door neighbor. Reason 3 is that even if Chile conquers Argentina, he'll suddenly be a central power, stuck between Brazil and Chile. Chile won't have anywhere to go with all his armies except through Peru, and Brazil will have the same temptation. The natural result is that if Peru wins his fight with Argentina, his next move will be to get eaten by his neighbors. In fall 1843, this crazy Peruvian player walks into a New Granadan center while simultaneously supporting Panama, the New Granada center I had previously hoped to attack in place, preventing me from taking it if I had attacked. I didn't end up attacking, because I thought it was likely that I was going to lose the key sea space of West Caribbean, but in retrospect that was a misjudgment. I think Peru supporting the unit of the player he's attacking is also probably a misjudgment, but only time will tell. Peru continues the same foreign policy in the south that I mentioned for spring. Chile starts to gain from the war against Argentina, capturing Patagonia, while Argentine forces push me to retreat from Falklands Current. Brazil takes Georgetown this season, and he even walks into North Atlantic Ocean to threaten my center of Greenland, which proves that even though he's not moving very much or making many enemies, he is making a lot of progress. I position to invade the United States, but it's another bad year for me. While everyone else is making progress, I'm again losing ground. In the build phase, I destroy one of the units I wanted to attack Panama with. All of the South American powers build armies except New Granada, who gets another fleet to attack me with, despite my best efforts to make peace there. In spring 1844, the original player for the United States sees the writing on the wall and surrenders. The result of this is that I capture New York City, although surprisingly little more happens because Spain again fails to enter orders this season when he could have taken Charleston. At this point, New Granada and Brazil start fighting, and Spain and I also make moves in New Granada's direction. He is finally biting off more than he can chew by fighting Brazil here. Brazil manages to defend against New Granada very well, while also occupying an Argentine center. Chile positions to take another center from Argentina as well, and on the other hand there's Peru. I have to take a moment to comment on the breathtaking madness of the Peruvian player here, because it almost deserves a separate video. Last year he attacked New Granada, and he seemed to be at war with Argentina. This season he pivots the anti-Argentinian units to try to fight against Brazil. He also walks into a Chilean center, and he moves into Costa Rica, right next to my center of Nicaragua, for no reason other than to apparently make me nervous. If you're following this, you'll observe that in the span of a year, Peru is apparently attacking or provoking every power in South America, without having achieved any palpable gains thus far. It almost goes without saying at this point, but if you think Peru has a happy ending in this game, you haven't been paying attention. In fall 1844, Peru moves back from the border with Brazil. He does get to keep the center he took from Chile, but looking at the map, it's hard to imagine where his next piece of expansion comes from. It feels like I'm watching someone who's playing without any kind of plan. Brazil gains 2 Argentine centers this year, while also advancing his position against New Granada. Masterful play from Brazil. Argentina crumples up and dies here, which seems kind of well-deserved, because he never had a good plan or any real allies as far as I could tell. Hopefully Peru won't be far behind him. In the north, the new player for the United States tries to position to flank me in Canada, while at the same time he loses Texas to Mexico. It feels like the United States is finally circling the drain. In the build phase, I get a new Jamaica fleet. Brazil gets even more armies, Peru gets an army, Mexico finally gets a new fleet which he builds on the west coast, Chile has been antagonizing him a bit, so I'm pretty sure that's a revenge fleet. In spring 1845, Chile pulls back from off the west coast of the United States, taking a defensive posture relative to Mexico. Mexico captures Alaska and positions to advance further east in the United States, which makes me a bit nervous since I was hoping we'd split the United States in half. In the Caribbean, Spain and I coordinate against New Granada. Brazil also attacks New Granada, capturing Angostura from him, while Chile and Peru work together against Brazil, despite Peru's previous occupation of a Chilean center. In the south, I move toward Chile and Peru's open back door. At this point, I'm working with Brazil, and I'm also looking for any easy-to-grab dots so that I can establish my strength in South America and not just North America. In fall, I take South Pacific Ocean, but I make little real progress generally. Mexico loses Texas while gaining New Orleans. New Granada drops down to 4 centers because both Brazil and Peru attack him. Peru is also still attacking Brazil, so I can't for the life of me tell why he thinks it's smart to stab New Granada, who's weakening anyway. Brazil gains 2 centers from New Granada this year, but he loses 2 to Peru and Chile. In the builds, Chile gets a fleet that can attack Brazil, as well as one that can defend against my raider unit. Peru likewise built a fleet to defend against me, as well as an army that can help against Brazil. Mexico gets a new army because he's still fighting the United States. In spring 1846, there's a lot of skirmishing, going in basically the same directions as before. I'm trying to attack Peru and Chile. They're fighting Brazil while defending against me, Spain NMRs, and Mexico and I forcefully push the United States back, which is the biggest piece of progress this season. It is a death blow. In fall, Spain moves into Charleston, taking the last U.S. center. Chile takes that center that Peru had taken from him back, Peru attacks New Granada some more, and Spain also attacks New Granada while Brazil advances into New Granadan space from the south and also occupies a Peruvian center. In the build phase, I got 2 Caribbean fleets. Mexico built a west coast fleet and an army, which unfortunately can now only be used against me, and Spain also got 2 Caribbean fleets. Brazil also got a new fleet as well as an army. In spring 1847, all but one of Mexico's armies moved toward me, while all my North American units hold in place. I finally take Panama, which had been a wish for a while. Chile, Peru, and I continue dancing around each other in the south, while Brazil continues expanding like a giant green sponge. In fall, I steal a Peruvian center, but the problem is Brazil is getting Peruvian and other centers faster than I am, and he already has the board leader position. Also, I lose Chicago to Mexico. In the build, I make the mistake of focusing on Mexico rather than Brazil, and I build 2 armies in the north, despite the fact that Brazil is fast becoming a solo threat. In spring 1848, Mexico and I continue to fight inconclusively in the north. Spain NMRs again, and Chile and I begin working together against Brazil. In fall, things continue in this pattern. Brazil takes over almost all of South America, and it begins to seem too late to actually stop him. Although Brazil gets builds, and he uses them, it seems almost pointless in this situation. In spring 1849, Brazil steamrolls over the defensive efforts from me, Chile, and Spain. Spain and Mexico are also fighting a bit at this point because Mexico isn't doing anything to help us stop the solo, and those centers might theoretically help us more if they were not in Mexican hands. In fall, Brazil successfully takes more centers from all of us, and pushes past the point that he needed to reach to win. The final position looks like this. Brazil finishes with 25 centers, you need 24 to win on this map. When the results are revealed, it turns out that Big Gun has achieved the solo victory. It was something of a frustrating game, since I had trouble finding good allies and I was almost constantly under attack by several people at a time, until Brazil started attacking me and the game moved toward its end. You can't win them all, as they say, and I'm certain there are things I could have done better here, mainly with my diplomacy. On the bright side, I did at least lose to an excellent player. If I lost to that player for Peru, I would have felt very silly. I hope you enjoyed this after-action report, and that you'll consider showing it with your likes, comments, subscribes, and maybe support on Patreon, like half of the people whose names are now on screen. We also appreciate comments, which boost the videos in the algorithm and make it more likely that fellow diplomacy fans will discover Florida Man Diplomacy. Until next time, Florida Man, out.